Continuing on with some common software problems, if you cannot mount a drive in your operating system, then you definitely want to fire up your disk management utilities. They will typically report the status of the drive, including if it's not even being detected, and tell you if it needs to maybe be reinitialized or reformatted, or it'll basically just show you the health state of the disk, and hopefully you can correct whatever problem is happening there. With respect to the system logs, at least in a Windows environment, Windows does write quite extensively to the event logs, and their default settings is to overwrite older events. So as something hits a certain age, it is overwritten in favor of newer ones. So the logs are continuously full, but they're cycling through, if you will. But somebody may have adjusted those settings. It is possible to set a static size on the logs and for them not to overwrite, in which event you have to manually clear them out or archive them. So generally you want to make sure that they are set to automatically overwrite or in some way configured to archive out the old logs to some sort of archive storage medium. But one way or another, you just need to make sure that the system will continue to write to the log. If your operating system itself seems to be slowing down in terms of performance, then typically it usually just indicates that server is being overworked. So ideally, just try to reduce the number of applications that are running on that server, and certainly verify that your virtual memory is configured correctly. And you always want at least as much virtual memory as the actual amount of physical memory. So if you have 8 gigs of RAM, then your page file should be around 8 gigs as well. Now, if you're relying on a high degree of virtual memory, then that really does indicate that you don't have enough physical memory. So you should just try to add some in that case, but you do still want to make sure that the virtual memory is configured correctly. Patch update failures can certainly happen. The Windows updates don't always succeed, and they can interfere with subsequent patches as well, because it may have been a while since you've updated, and since the last one there may have been a patch and then in fact an update to the patch. So the failure of one can certainly cause the failure of another one. So you generally just want to hit the logs and see what updates were applied successfully and which ones were missed. Service failures may occur following the installation of any kind of incompatible software. You might not have permissions to be able to run that service. Most services have dependencies on other services and vice versa, so that if one fails, others fail as well. So again, you just want to check your system logs to see what the state of the service is, why it failed, when it failed, things like that, what was happening around the time that it failed, were there any updates maybe that subsequently caused the service to fail, things along those lines. If your system seems to hang on a shutdown, it definitely could be an unresponsive driver, a service, or a program. If any one of those sort of hangs prior to shutdown, or at least during the shutdown, then the server just sits there and waits for that to end. So a lot of times you need to manually shut it down. So obviously you need to hit your logs again to see what's causing it to fail during the shutdown. But it could also be caused by corrupt page file, or even the boot volume itself. And you can utilize Process Monitor while shutting down to investigate the issues. But, ideally with servers anyway, you're not shutting them down all the time. In fact, they're very rarely shut down, but certainly from time to time you do still need to do it. And you want to make sure that it shuts down correctly and, of course, reboots correctly. So, again, check your logs, check all of those things out to see if you can run down what's preventing it from shutting down. And perhaps one of the most common issues in any network environment, users not able to print. Obviously, ensuring that the device itself is online, and of course the server that hosts that device. Check all the cable connections, and if everything seems to be good there, one of the very common fixes is to just clear the print queue and restart the spooler service on the server that's hosting the printer itself. That's usually a fairly easy fix, but it of course also could be permissions. Users simply may not have permission to print. Now, in which case, they should be getting an access denied error, not any kind of communications error. And of course, it can also be an incorrect driver. There's a lot of printers that will use similar drivers, so it needs to be the correct one in order to correctly process the print job. So lots of issues that can arise with software along with everything else. And as mentioned, it's just something you always need to keep on top of. Try to make sure everything is current, up to date, and performing as best as possible.